As the cold February wind slipped through the towering glass windows of Whitford and Clark law offices, Isabella did not feel the sting as sharply as she felt the voices around her. She sat stiffly in the high-backed leather chair, hands folded neatly in her lap, a picture of calm concealing the storm beneath. Across from her, Edward and Vivian, her adoptive siblings, leaned close, whispering, not about grief, not about memories of their parents, but about stocks, penthouses, and which priceless paintings would look better hanging in their private galleries. The room buzzed with polite indifference. A pearl-necklaced aunt, a smug family friend, an aging financial advisor all lined the polished mahogany walls, their glances toward Isabella tinged with the same quiet disdain. To them, she was the outsider, a charity case tolerated but never embraced. A whisper cut sharp across the table, "She's only here for the scraps." Then the moment arrived. The lawyer's voice, even and cold, announced the division of assets. Edward, the Manhattan penthouse. Vivian, the vineyard in Napa Valley. Liquid assets, millions in cash bonds and stocks divided evenly between the two. And then a pause that drew every eye toward her. To Isabella Monroe, he read the family estate in Vermont. The estate. A generous word for what everyone knew was a crumbling mansion swallowed by weeds and storms. Edward smirked, his voice low but loud enough. "Guess you won't be homeless, huh?" Laughter rippled through the room. Vivian giggled, suggesting she could turn it into a haunted house. Isabella did not flinch. She reached forward, picked up the cold rusted keys as though they were an unwanted burden. No speech, no thanks. She slipped them into her bag, stood, and walked out. Behind her, the whispers rose like cruel applause. But outside in the biting winter air, Isabella knew one thing: this was not an ending. It was a beginning, though none of them could imagine what those keys would unlock. Before we go further, let me pause for a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. We share stories that aren't just entertainment, they move you, make you think, and sometimes even force you to question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty and justice. So if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. It costs nothing, but it means the world to us. And don't forget the bell so you never miss the next powerful story. Now back to Isabella. Picture this: you've just walked out of a polished law office where your siblings laughed at you, where strangers whispered about your worth, and all you have left are the rusted keys to a place no one has cared about in years. Most people would crumble under the humiliation, maybe walk away forever. But Isabella was not most people. She walked through the icy streets, coat pulled tight each step, carrying the weight of betrayal. The world around her rushed on taxi horns, neon lights, strangers pushing past, but inside her chest was a deliberate silence. She didn't return to her tiny apartment in Queens. No. Instead, she walked straight to the train station, bought a one-way ticket north, and never looked back. As the train rattled through the night past suburbs, through small towns, into the snowy mountains of Vermont, Isabella tightened her grip on the iron keys. To her siblings, they were a joke. To the world, they meant nothing. But deep inside, Isabella held one unshakable truth. Sometimes what others throw away carries the power to change everything. Stay with us, because what Isabella found in that forgotten mansion will leave you breathless. Inside Whitford and Clark's office, the air felt colder than the February wind outside. Not because of temperature, but because of the way people looked at Isabella. She sat small at the polished mahogany table, hands folded in her lap, as if she were still the quiet girl told to sit still and be grateful. Across from her, Edward and Vivian whispered, their voices sharp, not with grief but with greed. They divided their parents' livestocks, the penthouse, the vineyard, as if preparing a feast. They didn't even glance at her. To them, she wasn't family, she was an afterthought. Along the walls, family, friends, and advisors leaned toward one another. "She's just here for the charity cut," one murmured. Another chuckled. "Always the outsider." When the lawyer finally cleared his throat, the rustle of papers made Isabella hold her breath. His voice was flat, professional, stripped of warmth. "As per the wishes of the late Mr. and Mrs. Monroe." And then it began. Edward received the Manhattan penthouse, Vivian the Napa Valley vineyard. Remaining assets, cash, bonds, stocks split evenly between them, and then silence. Every eye turned toward her, to Isabella Monroe, the family estate in Vermont. The estate. The word tasted bitter. Everyone knew it was not an inheritance, but a ruin. Edward's lips curled into a smirk. "Guess you won't be homeless." He sneered loud enough for the room. Laughter rang like breaking glass. Vivian tilted her head, her voice playful. "Maybe you could open it as a haunted house." Isabella didn't move. She let the sting pass through her. When the lawyer slid the heavy iron keys across, she picked them up with steady fingers. "No thanks. No words." She stood and walked out, leaving behind whispers and laughter. Outside in the freezing winter air, she gripped the keys tighter. To them it was nothing. To her, it was the beginning of everything. The train rocked north through the night, carrying Isabella away from neon city lights into the quiet wilderness of Vermont. By the time it slowed into the small station, snow was falling, thick, wet flakes that soaked through her coat and gloves. She stepped onto the frozen platform, the cold biting her skin like knives. Outside the rusted pickup she had hired idled its driver, leaning against the hood, watching her with the wary curiosity small towns reserve for strangers. The drive was long and winding, the road shrinking from gravel to dirt as the trees closed in tighter. Dusk fell shadows swallowing the sky until finally, at the end of an overgrown drive, the mansion appeared. Isabella's chest tightened. Once her family's pride, it now loomed like a ghost, its once white facade streaked black with years of storms. Windows gaped like broken eyes, some boarded, others wide open to the cold. The gardens her adoptive mother had once boasted of were now tangled with thorns and weeds. The driver whistled low. "Been a long time since anyone cared for this place," he muttered. Isabella didn't answer. She stepped out, boots crunching on ice, and stood still, staring. For a fleeting moment, she swore she could hear Edward and Vivian's laughter echoing, mocking her even here. She tightened her scarf, climbed the cracked stone steps, and slid the heavy key into the rusted lock. The door groaned open like lungs relearning how to breathe. A draft swept around her ankles, carrying dust and decay. Isabella did not flinch. She gripped the key like a talisman and stepped inside. The ruin they thought would break her had just welcomed her home. That first night was brutal. Isabella chose a small room tucked behind the kitchen, 4 walls, one window that barely closed, and a draft that never stopped. She rolled out a thin mattress, shook out her blanket, and lit the tiny heater she'd brought. Its weak glow couldn't fight the cold, but Isabella held her hands over it anyway, turning them back and forth as if the small ritual alone was enough to anchor her. Morning was gray and merciless. She picked up a broom and began. Sweep. Gather. Dump. Her movements became a steady metronome until her shoulders burned and her lungs ached with dust. Above her, the chandelier sagged from a single chain. The dining room groaned beneath cobwebs. The conservatory's glass lay shattered vines long dead. Still, Isabella pressed on. One corner, one room, one small victory at a time. 2 days later, she stepped into the village hardware store. The cheerful bell over the door clashed with the silence that followed. Conversations paused, eyes lingered. "That's the woman staying at the old Monroe place," someone whispered. The clerk scanned her supplies, tarps, gloves, crowbar, headlamp. He raised an eyebrow. "Roof's bad. Basement floods when the thaw hits." "Just saying." Isabella only nodded. "I'll take a wet vac too." Outside, 2 teens muttered loudly. "Why bother fixing a haunted museum?" One shrugged softer. "Still kind of brave, though." Isabella kept walking. By evening, she scraped paint until it curled like snow-patched holes with steady hands and pressed her palm flat against the wall, not pleased but aligned. No one believed in this place, but Isabella did, and that belief was enough to keep her moving forward. The days blurred together as Isabella fell into rhythm repair, clean rest, repeat. But it was in the library, even ruined, where something unusual caught her attention. The shelves stretched floor to ceiling, lined with cracked leather spines, the smell of paper and old pipe smoke lingering through decades of dust. A rolling ladder sat frozen mid-climb, abandoned years ago. Isabella slid it aside, gloved hands brushing faded titles. She pulled out a dusty atlas and frowned. The backboard behind it wasn't flush with the others. Kneeling, she tapped her knuckles against the wood. Once. Twice. The sound wasn't solid. It rang faintly hollow, like something waiting to be uncovered. She leaned closer, tracing the seam no wider than a hair running vertically where the planks didn't quite match. Her chest tightened not with fear, but recognition. Old houses carried secrets, and this one had just whispered to her. But she didn't force it. Not yet. She marked the spot with a small pencil dot, then stepped back. Timing mattered. She swept the floor another hour, letting the question breathe. By twilight, snow tapped softly against the cracked windows. That night, as she laid out her tools, neatly gloves, flashlight, flathead screwdriver, Isabella caught herself smiling just faintly. Whatever hid behind that seam wasn't going anywhere. Tomorrow she'd be ready to listen closer. The next morning, silver fog blurred the line between sky and ground. Isabella woke before her alarm, dressed in her warmest layers, and went straight to the library. She set her lamp low so shadows revealed more than light, then rolled the ladder back to the marked spot. Her tools were lined up like soldier's gloves, pry-bar flashlight. She slipped the flathead into the seam gentle, like testing a lock's teeth. A whisper of wood fibers gave way. She pressed again, higher this time. The panel shifted less than an inch, but enough. She froze. Breath in, breath out. No rush. She pressed her palm flat and eased the panel aside. It groaned open, revealing darkness. Cold metallic air spilled out like coins left too long in a drawer. She ducked inside. Stone beneath her boots. At the end of the narrow passage stood a steel door, tarnished but intact, its weight pulling her hand down when she touched it. A dial lock stared back, old stubborn. Isabella didn't know the code, but she had patience. The next afternoon, a locksmith arrived in a dented van, tools hidden under a blanket. He studied the vault with reverence. "Older than both of us combined," he muttered. For 4 hours, the library filled with faint clicks and long silences. Isabella sat cross-legged, waiting, steady as stone. At last, a final quiet snap. The door inched open. Cold air swept out, carrying the scent of aged paper and cedar. Inside, shelves lined the walls, stacked with bundles wrapped in canvas and wax. She opened one, crisp stacks of cash. Another shelf held gold bars heavy enough to ache in her wrist. A crate brimmed with uncut gems, rubies, sapphires, emeralds sparking like fire. This wasn't luck. It was a shift in gravity, and Isabella knew at once she would never again be the woman her siblings mocked in that lawyer's office. Isabella didn't treat the hidden fortune like a lottery win. She treated it as a foundation. Each night after locking the vault and hiding the key, where only she knew, she sat at her makeshift desk with a notebook running numbers, studying investments, and planning each step with surgical precision. No one could know. Not yet. By spring, scaffolding wrapped the mansion's facade like armor. Fresh paint erased decades of weather-covering storm scars. Gardens once strangled by weeds began to breathe again, rows of flowers soaking in sunlight, gravel paths cut with deliberate care. Workers came and went whispering about the woman who paid on time, never raised her voice, and always knew exactly what she wanted. Quiet boss, one said, but don't cut corners, she'll notice. Inside the library transformed first. Shelves polished ladder repaired amber light, returning as if it had waited for her all along. Yet behind one bookcase, the vault remained hidden, silent, fueling the rebirth without fanfare. The village, once skeptical, began to notice. At the hardware store, the clerk smirked as he rang up her bulk orders. "She's going big," he told another. By summer, even the bakery gossip had changed tune. The city outsider was no longer wasting time in a haunted ruin, she was reviving a dead estate. And Isabella. She didn't seek validation. She didn't rush back to Manhattan or Napa. Every nail hammered, every wall restored was a quiet promise to herself she was building something they could never take from her again. Brick by brick, she was rewriting her place in the story her siblings once mocked her out of. It happened on a raw November afternoon, the kind where the sky couldn't decide between rain or snow. Isabella had just stepped out of her study when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not the rumble of a delivery van, but a cautious, hesitant approach. She moved to the window, parting the heavy curtain just enough to see a black sedan idling beneath bare oak trees. Edward stepped out first. His once tailored coat now hung loose, pride collapsing as fast as his fortunes. Vivian followed, dressed in muted beige, trying for elegance but betrayed by frayed cuffs. For a moment they simply stood there, as if the house itself unnerved them. When Isabella opened the door, the November wind sliced through. Isabella, Vivian's voice cracked softer than she remembered. "Can we come in?" She stepped aside. No words. Only their cautious footsteps echoing against gleaming wood floors and polished banisters. The chandelier they once mocked now glittered above, restored, daring them to look up. At the dining table they sat with folded hands. No smirks this time, no jokes. Edward cleared his throat, his voice stripped of arrogance. "Things haven't been good." Vivian glanced away. "The vineyard's gone. The penthouse, too. We have debts, real ones. We didn't know where else to go." From the kitchen, the faint hum of the kettle filled the pause. Isabella poured tea into 3 cups, sliding theirs across before taking her seat. She let the silence stretch heavy, making them feel every second of waiting. Finally, she spoke calm and deliberate. "When you gave me this house, you thought it was worthless. I turned it into more than you could imagine, and I did it without taking anything from you. Now you're here because you need me." The silence at the table was thick enough to cut. Edward stared at his hands, knuckles white, pride breaking in slow motion. Vivian's voice trembled as she finally whispered, "We'll do whatever it takes." Isabella lifted her cup, sipping with the calm certainty of a woman who no longer owed them anything. Her gaze lingered steady over the rim. You will repay every cent, she said softly, each word deliberate. But more than that, you'll work. Not just for me, but for something that matters. The foundation I built in our parents' name is expanding. You'll help run it, and you'll answer to me. Edward bristled faintly, the ghost of old arrogance twitching in his jaw, but he didn't speak. Vivian's eyes filled with something closer to relief than shame. Slowly she nodded. Edward followed, shoulders slumping as if setting down a burden carried too long. When they left the black sedan rolling down the long restored drive, Isabella stood at the library door. Her eyes traced the polished shelves, the hidden vault beyond the heartbeat of everything that had made this moment possible. The mansion no longer felt like ruin. It was proof solid and undeniable of her transformation. Word spread quickly through the village. At the bakery, locals leaned over the counter. They're working for her now. Another answered, life's funny like that. By spring, the three siblings could be seen together at ribbon cuttings and charity galas. But everyone knew whose vision guided the room, whose name was on the checks. Isabella didn't need to gloat. The mansion itself, standing tall at the end of the long drive, said everything. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching someone fall, it's making them rise, even if they must do it under your roof. And now I'll ask you, if you were in Isabella's place, would you forgive? Or would